Have you ever noticed how quickly the word sorry leaves your mouth? Sometimes before you've even had time to think. You apologize for taking up space, for asking questions, for expressing needs, for existing too loudly, too quietly, too imperfectly. Over time, sorry becomes less of a response and more of a reflex, a shield, a way of saying, please don't be upset with me, please don't leave, please don't think I'm too much. For many people who apologize excessively, this habit is not about politeness. It is about survival. It is rooted in a deep, often hidden belief that they are somehow less deserving than others, less important, less lovable, less worthy of patience, forgiveness, or understanding. Beneath every unnecessary apology is usually a quiet fear. If I don't make myself small, I might lose connection. This pattern rarely begins in adulthood. It often starts early in environments where love felt conditional, where mistakes were punished harshly, where emotional expression was dismissed, where approval had to be earned through compliance, perfection, or emotional invisibility. In these settings, children learn that safety comes from pleasing others, from avoiding conflict, from taking responsibility for other people's moods. If you grew up walking on emotional eggshells, you probably learned to apologize before anyone even accused you of wrongdoing. You learned to anticipate disappointment, to scan faces for signs of irritation, to blame yourself for tension that wasn't yours to carry. Over time, I'm sorry became your emotional currency, your way of keeping peace, your way of staying connected. In some cases, excessive apologizing develops in response to trauma, emotional neglect, bullying, repeated rejection, or relationships where boundaries were ignored. When someone's feelings were constantly minimized or invalidated, they learned that their pain mattered less than keeping others comfortable. Apologizing became a way to protect themselves from further harm. As adults, this pattern quietly follows them into every part of life. In conversations, they apologize for speaking too long, for sharing opinions, for asking for clarification, for needing reassurance, for taking time to think. Even when they've done nothing wrong, they feel responsible for any hint of discomfort around them. In relationships, they often overfunction emotionally. They take the blame during conflicts. They assume they are at fault when something goes wrong. They try to fix things that aren't broken. They apologize for having emotions, for being sensitive, for needing support. They become experts at emotional self-erasure. At work, they downplay achievements. They apologize before presenting ideas. They fear being perceived as difficult. They hesitate to advocate for themselves. They tolerate unfair treatment longer than they should. They internalize criticism deeply and struggle to accept praise. On the surface, these individuals often appear kind, considerate, and emotionally intelligent. Others may describe them as easygoing or low maintenance. But underneath, there is often a constant internal battle, a quiet voice that says, don't inconvenience anyone, don't make mistakes, don't be a burden. Excessive apologizing is rarely about guilt. It is about fear, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being seen as flawed. At the core of this pattern is usually a fragile sense of self-worth. Many chronic apologizers secretly believe that their value depends on how useful, agreeable, or pleasant they are to others. They don't feel inherently worthy of love simply for existing. Instead, they feel they must earn it through emotional labor, self-sacrifice, and constant self-monitoring. This belief creates a deep emotional imbalance. They give more than they receive. They accommodate more than they express. They listen more than they are heard. And over time, resentment, exhaustion, and emptiness quietly build. Yet, because they associate self-advocacy with selfishness, they often suppress these feelings. They tell themselves they are overreacting, too sensitive, too needy. They apologize to themselves for having normal human needs. This pattern is closely linked to people-pleasing and anxious attachment. When someone grows up unsure whether love is stable, they become hyper-focused on maintaining connection. They learn to prioritize others' emotions above their own. Apologizing becomes a way of saying, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you close. Ironically, this often leads to relationships where their needs remain invisible. Because they rarely assert boundaries, others may unintentionally take advantage. not out of malice, but because no resistance is ever expressed. Over time, the chronic apologizer may feel unseen, unappreciated, and emotionally drained, yet still afraid to speak up. Internally, many of these individuals live with persistent self-doubt. They replay conversations in their minds. They analyze every word. They worry about how they were perceived. They assume negative interpretations. A delayed text becomes proof of rejection. A neutral tone becomes criticism. This hypervigilance keeps their nervous system in a constant state of alert. Their body is always preparing for emotional danger that rarely comes. This contributes to anxiety, burnout, and emotional fatigue. There is also often a strong connection to shame. Shame is not the belief that I made a mistake, it is the belief that I am the mistake. People who apologize excessively often carry this unconscious shame. They feel fundamentally flawed. Too much, not enough, wrong somehow. Apologizing becomes a way to preempt judgment, to say, I know I'm imperfect, please don't punish me for it. Over time, this creates a painful split between who they are and who they feel allowed to be. Their authentic self becomes hidden behind politeness, compliance, and emotional restraint. They may struggle to express anger, disappointment, or frustration. These emotions feel dangerous. They associate them with rejection, so instead they turn them inward. They blame themselves. They apologize. Yet beneath this softness is often deep emotional strength, sensitivity, empathy, awareness. These individuals feel deeply. They notice subtle shifts. They care profoundly about connection. Their apologizing is not weakness. It is misplaced protection. Healing begins when they start questioning the belief that they must earn their place in other people's lives. It begins when they notice how often they apologize for existing, for having needs, for taking time, for being imperfect, for feeling hurt, for asking for clarity, for wanting more. Learning to pause before saying sorry is not about becoming rude. It is about becoming honest. It is about asking, did I actually do something wrong, or am I just afraid of being seen? Sometimes, thank you can replace sorry. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for understanding. This small shift begins to rewire self-perception. Another step is learning to tolerate discomfort. Boundaries will feel awkward at first. Expressing needs may feel selfish. Disagreement may trigger anxiety. But discomfort is not danger. It is growth. It is also essential to reconnect with self-worth that is not performance-based. You do not have to be useful to be lovable. You do not have to be agreeable to be accepted. You do not have to be perfect to belong. You do not have to shrink to be safe. Your presence alone is enough. This healing process is not about changing who you are. It is about reclaiming who you have always been beneath the fear. The part of you that deserves space, voice, respect, care. With time, self-compassion softens the internal critic. Awareness replaces automatic self-blame. Healthy relationships reinforce that love does not require self-erasure. You begin to speak without apologizing first, to exist without justification, to take up space without guilt, to trust that you are allowed to be human, and slowly the word sorry returns to its rightful place, not as a shield, not as a survival tool, but as a genuine expression of empathy, used when it truly belongs, because you were never meant to live your life apologizing for your existence. You were meant to live it knowing you are worthy, without conditions, without explanations, without shrinking. And that realization, once it takes root, becomes the beginning of a gentler, freer, more authentic way of being.